There's a certain kind of silence that only happens right before something goes wrong. It's subtle at first. A shift in the air. A pause that feels out of place. The kind of moment where conversations trail off without anyone knowing why. That silence fell over a small California cafe just after 10:17 a.m. Watch till the end. Subscribe and comment where you are watching from. The sun was pouring through the windows. Laptops glowed on wooden tables. Orders were being called out over the steady rhythm of steaming milk. It was an ordinary morning until the door opened and a uniformed police officer stepped inside. He didn't rush. He didn't smile either. He scanned the room once, twice, eyes moving with quiet purpose. Most people barely noticed him. Until he spoke. "Ma'am, step away from the counter. Now." The words sliced clean through the cafe noise. Conversations froze mid-sentence. A ceramic mug clinked loudly against a saucer. Someone near the window slowly lowered their phone. At the counter stood a woman in a dark hoodie and baseball cap, sunglasses shielding her face. She had one hand resting near the register, waiting for her order like everyone else. She turned, slowly, and that's when the whispers began. "Wait! No way! Is that?" She removed her sunglasses. It was Ronda Rousey, former UFC bantamweight champion, Olympic medalist, one of the most dominant fighters in combat sports history, a woman whose stare alone once sent opponents into survival mode. And now she was standing in a cafe, facing a police officer addressing her like a suspect. Phones came out instantly. The officer's posture remained rigid, professional, controlled. "I've received complaints," he continued, voice firm enough for half the cafe to hear. "You're causing a disturbance inside this establishment." A ripple of disbelief spread through the room. Rousey's expression didn't explode, it tightened. Controlled tension. The kind of composure that comes from years inside a cage under. Bright lights. "I'm just waiting for my coffee," she replied evenly. But the damage, at least visually, was already done. Someone near the pastry display was recording. Another customer angled their phone for a clearer shot. The scene had that unmistakable electricity, the feeling that something historic, or at least viral, was unfolding in real time. The clip that would later circle the globe began right there. Not when the officer entered. Not when he spoke to staff. Not what happened before. Just the confrontation. Within an hour, the footage was everywhere. Cop publicly confronts Ronda Rousey. Power trip. Disrespect in broad daylight. The internet did what it does best. It filled in the blanks. Comment sections turned into battlefields. Some accused the officer of deliberately targeting a high-profile athlete. Others suggested ego was at play, authority meeting celebrity. Body language experts broke down his stance. Legal commentators speculated about potential civil claims. The phrase "lawsuit pending" began trending before lunchtime. And the clip, only seconds long, made it look damning. A stern officer. A global sports icon. A silent cafe watching. It felt confrontational. It felt unnecessary. It felt personal. By mid-afternoon, reaction videos had millions of views. Podcasts discussed it as a symbol of overreach. Anonymous sources online hinted that Rousey was furious and considering legal action. But here's what no one saw in that viral moment. The minutes before. Because 5 minutes before the officer stepped inside that cafe, a 911 call had been placed. An employee reported a heated verbal altercation near the counter. A customer allegedly yelling, refusing to leave, creating a disturbance that was escalating quickly. The description provided over dispatch was brief. Female, dark hoodie, baseball cap. When the officer arrived, one employee gestured urgently toward the counter area. But what body cam footage would later reveal was that another woman matching that description had just exited through a side door seconds earlier. In a crowded cafe, with overlapping clothing and limited information. From the officer's angle, there was one person near the counter who matched the call. That person was Ronda Rousey. The full body camera footage, released nearly 24 hours later, told a very different story than the viral clip. It showed the officer entering calmly. It showed him asking staff where the disturbance occurred. It showed him approaching the only individual matching the description he'd been given. Firm tone, yes. Direct, yes. But procedural. Not aggressive. Not hostile. And the moment identification was clarified, everything shifted. Just verifying, he said after confirming details. Appreciate your cooperation. Rousey nodded. No problem, she replied. The entire exchange lasted under 2 minutes. No raised voices. No threats. No arrest. No citation. The individual involved in the earlier argument had already left before officers arrived. There was no targeting. No public humiliation campaign. No abuse of authority. No lawsuit filed. No disciplinaria acción. No official complaint. And perhaps most surprising of all, no public statement from Ronda Rousey condemning the officer. For nearly 24 hours, the internet had already written its own ending. Comment sections demanded accountability. Influencers promised inside updates. Legal analysts debated hypothetical court battles that were never actually in motion. But behind the noise, reality was much quieter. After the body camera footage was reviewed in full, it became clear that the officer had responded to a legitimate call. The cafe staff had reported a disturbance. A description had been given. And in a crowded room filled with similar clothing and overlapping details, he approached the wrong person. It lasted less than 2 minutes. No handcuffs. No raised voices. No dramáticos que lachen. Just clarification and resolution. According to those present, once the confusion was cleared up, the mood inside the cafe shifted almost immediately. Conversations slowly resumed. Phones lowered. The espresso machine came back to life. Life continued. Rousey reportedly finished waiting for her order. The officer exited. And that was it. But the internet doesn't move backward as fast as it moves forward. By the time the full context surfaced, millions had already formed opinions based on a partial clip. The emotional reaction had outrun the facts. Headlines that hinted at legal warfare remained floating online long after the reality proved far less explosive. In the end, there was no courtroom battle. No televars de palegi. No viral showdown between authority and athlete. Just a misunderstanding, magnified by timing, celebrity, and 12 seconds of incomplete footage. Those 12 seconds became the world story. On TikTok, the clip looped endlessly, captions like, "You won't believe what this cop did to Ronda Rousey," and "Power trip or public humiliation," drew millions of views. Instagram stories flashed across feeds with short commentary. "Can you believe it?" Twitter erupted in threads, each one louder than the last, as users dissected every frame, every angle, every second of the interaction. People debated whether the officer had been reckless, whether Rousey would respond publicly, and whether the situation would end in a lawsuit that could make headlines for weeks. Meanwhile, the cafe itself became an unwilling stage. By late morning, reporters were circling outside, vans idling by the street. Curious fans arrived, cameras in hand, hoping to catch a glimpse of the champion who had reportedly been humiliated in public. Patrons who had been there that morning were interviewed, their words woven into the growing narrative of confrontation. "It was tense," one said. "Could feel it in the air." Another described the scene as surreal, like something out of a movie. Every account amplified the drama, feeding the storm online. Online, the theories exploded. Some claimed it was a power play by the officer, a rare clash of authority versus celebrity. Others speculated that Rousey might have reacted differently, that this moment could mark the beginning of a public feud. Legal analysts on YouTube debated the likelihood of civil action. "You have a high-profile athlete being publicly confronted," one said, leaning toward the camera. "If she chose to pursue legal action, it could set a precedent." But the clip alone doesn't tell the whole story. As the world speculated, the cafe itself tried to return to normal. Baristas whispered nervously, cleaning counters and wiping down tables, glancing at the entrance as if the situation might reignite at any moment. The officer had long since left. Rousey, too, had quietly received her order and exited the scene without incident. Yet outside, the social media narrative continued to evolve, twisting and exaggerating what had happened inside those walls. And then came the body camera footage, full, unedited, uncut, the kind of evidence that tells a story far different from 12 seconds of viral drama. It began with the officer arriving at the cafe after receiving a call reporting a verbal disturbance. The description was vague: female, dark hoodie, baseball cap. The report noted that the individual had been shouting at staff and refusing to leave. The officer's response was precise, methodical, professional. The footage revealed what no one had seen before. Another person matching the description had just left the cafe moments before the officer arrived. In the confusion of a crowded morning rush, with overlapping clothing, the officer approached the only person near the counter who could fit the description. That person was, coincidentally, Ronda Rousey. Every move that had seemed confrontational in the viral clip suddenly made sense in context. The officer's firm tone was procedural, not aggressive. His gestures were aimed at clarifying a potential disturbance, not intimidating a global athlete. When he confirmed her identity and realized there had been no involvement in the earlier altercation, his demeanor softened. He thanked her for her cooperation. She nodded politely, accepted the explanation, and resumed waiting for her order. The confrontation lasted under 2 minutes. No shouting, no threats, no escalation. No dramatic showdown between authority and celebrity. The individual responsible for the earlier disturbance had already exited. What seemed like a public humiliation had been nothing more than a brief, mistaken identity. And yet, by the time the full story emerged, the internet's reaction had already hardened. Millions had formed opinions based on a tiny snippet of footage, the way a single frame in a film can suggest something far more dramatic than it is. Headlines that hinted at scandal remained online, spreading misinformation and exaggeration long after the truth had been revealed. In reality, there was no lawsuit, no charges, no public apology, no viral feud between Rousey and the officer. Just a quiet moment of misunderstanding, resolved calmly and efficiently. Rousey finished her morning coffee. The officer returned to his duties. Life continued inside the cafe as if nothing had happened. Sometimes, the loudest story isn't the one that actually happened. It's the one we construct in our minds, fueled by incomplete footage, social media speculation, and the allure of scandal. And sometimes, the truth waits quietly at the very end, revealing that what seemed explosive, shocking, and scandalous was really just human error, coincidence, and misperception. Because the real story wasn't about a cop humiliating a champion. It wasn't about lawsuits or viral outrage. It was about a moment frozen out. Of context, a rush of assumptions, and the quiet reality that sometimes the world's most dramatic moments are nothing like they appear.